atomic.
Shadow Garden alerts Cid that massive sums of money have been funneling into the city, and the timing is suspicious. The red moon is rising, heralding the return of Elizabeth the Crimson Blood Queen, one of Lawless City's 3 fearsome rulers. Tagging along is his sister Claire, dispatched by the Dark Knight Association to handle a vampire problem, who has simply dragged Cid into the chaos, as is tradition.
Oh shit, here we go again.
They casually walk past Goldie and Quentin, already beaten and sold into slavery, while the city's vampires unleash their ghoul servants to tear everything apart. Cid, of course, thrives. He gets theatrically rescued by Mary the Ancient Vampire Hunter, whom he is absolutely delighted to meet as though she's a rare collectible character in his personal RPG. Skell and Poe, meanwhile, have shown up to Lawless City for deeply embarrassing personal reasons involving prostitutes and are immediately attacked by ghouls. As Shadow, Cid saves a prostitute named Marie. Claire, having heard a chaotic second-hand description of Cid, becomes convinced he's been taken as a sacrifice to awaken Elizabeth. The city's other 2 rulers, Yukimi the White Fox Spirit and Juggernaut the Black Tyrant, interrupt their own war with each other to crash Elizabeth's tower, and Cid naturally interrupts them. Undeterred by Cid's interruption, Juggernaut and Yukimi barrel past him and smash their way into Elizabeth's tower, leaving Cid to deal with White Devil, Elizabeth's enslaved, notorious murderer of a guard dog, whom he cuts to pieces without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, Beta, running into Claire and Mary, calmly drops the bombshell that Shadow Garden's actual plan here is to steal Elizabeth's blood for research. Things get weirder inside the tower. Juggernaut nearly kills Mary, who responds by force-kissing Claire to drink her blood and heal herself, which is how Claire discovers her new acquaintance is, in fact, a vampire. Cid unceremoniously tosses Juggernaut off the tower like unwanted luggage, leaving Claire baffled as to why Lord Shadow would bother saving them. The episode's emotional core arrives with Mary's backstory. 1,000 years ago, Queen Elizabeth was a peace-seeking ruler who helped vampires overcome their thirst for blood, allowing them to walk in sunlight and build a harmonious community with humans called the Haven. But during the last red moon, she went mad and slaughtered every soul in the Haven. Overcome with remorse, she took her own life. But before Mary could protect her body, it was stolen by Lord Crimson, a villain who has secretly ruled from Elizabeth's throne for 10 centuries. Cid, fully absorbing none of this emotional weight, raids Crimson's treasury for retirement funds and then kills Crimson mid-resurrection ritual. With Crimson dead, Elizabeth begins to stir, and she is immediately terrifyingly formidable even while half asleep. Claire arrives just after Cid has slipped out and is attacked by the awakening vampire queen, with Shadow Garden barely arriving in time to drag her to safety. Yukimi and Juggernaut join the fray, but in a devastating display of power, Elizabeth seizes control of the dormant demon blood running through every member of Shadow Garden. Claire, carrying a higher concentration of demon blood than the others, goes completely berserk. Suddenly, Aurora takes direct possession of Claire's body and attempts to unleash Cid's signature atomic spell against Elizabeth, but Claire's body can't survive that kind of power, and the attempt fails, Aurora vanishing just as the real Cid shows up to battle Elizabeth himself. In a hilarious side note, Beta is practically in tears with gratitude watching Cid protect the group, completely unaware he is actually shielding the gold coins he dropped during his dramatic entrance. Elizabeth, genuinely impressed, asks his name. Rather than answer, Cid detonates his recovery atomic, a spectacular move that transforms every ghoul in the city back into a human and neatly knocks Elizabeth unconscious. Claire, shaken but determined, vows to master the demon blood within her. Cid, for his part, is mildly disappointed he only recovered 500 gold coins in the chaos, but consoles himself with the thought that he can always come back and steal more. The arc shifts gears entirely as we enter the world of high-stakes financial crime and corporate warfare. Garter, the president of the Major Corporate Alliance, MCA, effectively organized crime wearing a business suit, declares war on Mitsugoshi. Alpha's plan is elegant in its brutality. Forcing Garter's thugs into the open will flush out any Diablo's cult members embedded in the MCA. Cid, piecing things together with his signature accidental genius, deduces that Shadow Garden secretly owns Mitsugoshi and has been making enemies for him without any consultation, which is deeply on brand. Deciding Shadow Garden has gone too far and seeing an opportunity to profit enormously, Cid arranges a secret meeting with Yukimi and proposes taking down both Mitsugoshi and Garter simultaneously as a warning. Yukimi helpfully flags that Garter's boss is the devil swordsman Getten, and that killing Getten is her personal business. The scheme Cid proposes, since MCA and Mitsugoshi own competing banks, they should flood the market with counterfeit banknotes to destroy public trust, trigger a bank run, and collapse both banks in the chaos. Yukimi congratulates him for understanding that this would cause everyone to withdraw their gold, annihilating both institutions. The episode also delivers a fan-favorite moment when Delta visits Cid while hunting MCA thugs, and Getten dispatches his elite assassins, the Four Clovers, to attack Mitsugoshi. One of those Clovers turns out to be Zabra, Delta's brother. She kills him anyway, then cheerfully notes she has over 1,000 siblings, so it's fine. The Four Clovers pivot their attack directly to Mitsugoshi's CEO, Luna, who is secretly Gamma in her corporate alias, with orders to eliminate her. Gamma, despite having below amateur-level combat skills, turns out to be absurdly resistant to physical damage, so she bulldozes through the assassination attempt through sheer structural durability alone, killing Cloverleaf 1 in the process. Getten, now taking the threat personally and furious about the continued resistance, driven by his obsession with revenge on the boy who scarred his face years ago, a boy known as Stylish Bandit Slayer, who is, of course, a younger Cid. Yukimi, executing her part of the plan, prints millions of fake banknotes and pumps them into the broader economy through Lawless City's financial channels. On the Shadow Garden side, Alpha detects the counterfeit money flooding the economy and orders an immediate investigation into the source. With a bank run happening now, all that gold flows back to citizens and becomes forever unrecoverable by the cult. Number 666 falls directly into a trap set by Cid, operating under the alias John Smith, who warns her cryptically that it is too early for Shadow Garden to learn the truth. 666, utterly humiliated and unaware it was her own master. The John Smith situation escalates beautifully. Alpha dispatches Delta to track down this mysterious figure, but Delta clocks him immediately by scent. Cid claims he's undercover and temporarily gets Delta off his back by sending her to go find Juggernaut. Delta's unexplained absence causes Alpha to leap to the logical conclusion that John Smith killed her, raising the threat level considerably. Both Alpha and Getten independently figure out that John Smith is engineering a bank run, and the financial tension ratchets up. Beta, trying to brief Cid on the crisis, drowns him in financial jargon. Cid is completely lost, but his confused expression reads as cold fury, which terrifies Beta into thinking she's angered him. The episode's emotional gut punch arrives when Alpha herself moves to assassinate John Smith, and upon confronting him, realizes with dawning horror that this mysterious operator undermining Shadow Garden's plans is none other than Cid, her master and savior. Refusing to simply accept that, Alpha fights him to prove she is still useful to whatever impossible plan he must surely be executing. Cid defeats her, announces he is temporarily withdrawing from Shadow Garden until his scheme plays out. Yukimi finishes swapping counterfeit notes for real gold across both banks, leaving them insolvent, and then reveals the full history with Getten. He was once her fiancé, an arranged alliance between their clans, until his thirst for power led him to the cult. She spent years quietly accumulating enough power to control a third of Lawless City, and now, thanks to Cid's scheming, Getten is finally exposed and vulnerable. Evidence emerges that Getten had his own counterfeit banknote operation running for the cult, which gives Alpha a desperate hope that Cid's counterfeiting was a counter-move to undermine the cult's scheme rather than a betrayal of Shadow Garden. This is confirmed when a coded letter from Cid surfaces, explaining his true motives and pointing them to the hidden gold's location. Alpha retrieves it all for Shadow Garden, and for a moment everything seems resolved. Then comes the punchline. Cid, relieved his plan worked, goes to collect his gold and finds it gone. Having never in a million years imagined that Shadow Garden would actually decode his deliberately dramatic, cryptic letter, he concludes that Getten must have stolen it. Yukimi, meanwhile, faces Getten in a personal duel and wins, but chooses to let him live, wanting it to mean something. Getten swallows a demonic power pill and stabs her in the back anyway. He is then immediately defeated by Cid, who has stormed into the scene looking for his gold. Getten recognizes Cid as the stylish bandit slayer, which means Yukime suddenly understands that it was young Cid who inadvertently saved her life that night, causing her to fall entirely in love with him. Before dying, Getten entrusts Yukime to John Smith. Alpha reveals Shadow Garden's existence to Yukime and proposes an alliance, which Yukime accepts immediately. Cid, having catastrophically misread Getten's final words, spends the following weeks digging up the field where Getten died looking for buried gold, with Delta cheerfully assisting. He eventually gives up and vanishes, at which point Delta immediately digs up something valuable in his absence. Skell and Poe, never ones to learn from past disasters, break into Cid's room and steal 6 tickets to a Mitsugoshi luxury hot springs resort. Unfortunately for them, the tickets were personally gifted to Cid, so Shadow Garden intercepts Skell and Poe and interrogates them thoroughly. Through a perfect storm of misunderstanding and desperate lying, Shadow Garden concludes that Cid has secretly tasked Skell, Poe, and 3 chosen shadows with a mission at the resort, disguised as 3 romantic couples. Beta, Zeta, and Delta are selected as the partners. As the days pass and the shadows relax into what feels increasingly like just a very pleasant holiday, questions start arising about whether Cid was simply giving everyone a break. Then Skell and Poe are caught spying on the girls, punished accordingly, and their tears, shed in genuine misery, react mysteriously with the spring water. Ita, the brilliant and slightly unhinged researcher of Shadow Garden who built the resort after Cid once casually mentioned a legend about a dragon and a princess, recognizes the reaction and proceeds to torment Beta, a self-proclaimed elven princess, until she weeps into the spring, completing the legendary condition and summoning an actual dragon from the water. The shadows defeat it efficiently. Alpha chooses to interpret all of this as Cid's masterful design. Cid settles into an inn run by Marie, the prostitute he saved back in Lawless City, who has rebuilt her life since that encounter. The political situation in Oriana Kingdom is deteriorating. Numbers 666, 665, and 664 meet up with 559 on a surveillance mission targeting supporters of the deeply unpleasant Prince Perv Ashat. The mission goes sideways fast when they witness Queen Reyna, number 666's own mother, use her royal blood to unseal a hidden chamber and hand over the Ring of Succession to cult officer Kuadoy. 559 immediately declares 666 a traitor and attacks Kuadoy herself. In the aftermath, 666 escorts Reyna back to Oriana and quietly resumes her civilian identity as Rose. Back at the inn, Perv's soldiers shake down Marie for fabricated taxes, so Cid kills them all in the dark and keeps their gold, then delivers funds to Marie as Lord Shadow. Meanwhile, after an astonishing 3 days and 3 nights of combat, 665, 664, and 559 are finally rescued by Cid, who kills Kuadoy efficiently. 559 files a report accusing Rose of treason for stopping the assassination. Cid, barely listening, spots a newspaper announcing Rose's engagement to Perv. Since this catastrophically derails the Tyrant Queen storyline he has been mentally scripting for Rose, Cid loses his temper. he immediately departs for Oriana to personally get the story back on track. Lambda, Shadow Garden's number 11, cold-bloodedly suggests Rose should simply be eliminated as a loose end, but stands down when Cid makes clear he is handling this personally. Getting into the palace requires finesse. Epsilon, performing publicly under her famous musician alter ego Chiron, arranges for Cid to enter as her student. Perv, suspicious, demands Cid perform to prove his credentials. Cid performs Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata at a level that genuinely dazzles the assembled nobility, while simultaneously using subtle magic to pickpocket their money and jewelry, including the Ring of Succession from Perv's own pocket, which Cid pockets himself under the assumption it's just Rose's wedding ring. After some time, he makes his way to Rose on his own. Cid pleads for her to reclaim herself, to pick up her sword again and forge her own path. She refuses, telling him to forget about her and accept that she intends to go through with the marriage to Perv. That night, Cid overhears Perv threatening to kill Reyna if Rose does not continue to comply, making the full horror of her situation clear. Epsilon and Lambda assume Cid is distracted by the missing ring, which turns out to be deeply important as it controls a superweapon called Black Rose capable of annihilating all of Oriana. Perv gloats to his superior Mordred that he will soon control Black Rose through the marriage, entirely unaware the ring box in his pocket is now empty. Adding another layer of ugliness, it is revealed that Perv and Queen Reyna are willingly having an affair. Shadow Garden raids a cult facility hunting a missing relic and finds it already gone. Cid, formulating a plan to rescue Reyna for Rose's sake, overhears something that reframes everything. Perv and Reyna are conspiring to have Rose killed immediately after the wedding, revealing that Reyna has been cooperating with the cult from the very beginning. Cid, operating as Shadow, decides the most direct approach is to show Rose the truth and arranges for her to see Reyna and Perv together, hoping the shock and rage will reawaken her fighter's instincts. Instead, it destroys her. Rose collapses emotionally, believing that every sacrifice she ever made for her kingdom was meaningless. It is Cid, dropping back into his civilian persona, who reaches her, not through grand speeches, but by simply and honestly pressing her to decide what she actually wants. Cid then accidentally leaves the ring behind when he departs. Perv reveals that to actually transfer the ring's power to himself, he must complete the marriage, and upon discovering the ring is missing, he frantically hides that fact from Mordred. At the wedding, Rose acts. She publicly refuses Perv, puts on the ring herself expecting power, and instead triggers a recorded message from her father, naming Perv as a traitor conspiring with the cult and urging the people to trust Rose as queen. The crowd erupts in her favor. Rose commands Perv's arrest for treason. Then Mordred appears, beheads both Perv and Reyna with terrifying efficiency, and uses the missing relic to activate Black Rose, summoning Archdemon Ragnarok to obliterate Oriana entirely. But Mordred is interrupted by Lord Shadow, who strolls in and casually severs Ragnarok's arm. Ragnarok regenerates the severed arm like it's nothing. The wedding guests immediately begin shedding disguises. The majority of them are Shadow Garden operatives who have been embedded in attendance this entire time. While Cid occupies himself with Ragnarok, Epsilon and Beta take on Mordred. The illusion shatters quickly. His famous technique is revealed to be entirely dependent on an ancient magical elven sword he stole, not genuine skill, and once that's exposed, he falls to the shadows. Mordred reveals that the cult is aware of multiple dimensions orbiting each other like planets in a solar system, and every few millennia, these dimensions collide and briefly merge. This fusion was how both magic and humanity arrived in this dimension in the first place. Black Rose itself is an artificial dimensional gateway engineered to force these collisions on demand. Cid, who has been half listening while dealing with Ragnarok and finding the whole boss fight thoroughly underwhelming, dispatches the archdemon with bored efficiency. Mordred, refusing to accept defeat, consumes whatever power remains to him and transforms into a demonic creature. So Cid responds by detonating an atomic explosion of such incomprehensible scale that it lights up the entire planet like a second sun. However, the sheer scale of the explosion has an unintended consequence. It destabilizes and collapses Black Rose entirely, and the resulting dimensional implosion drags Cid straight through the gateway and into another dimension. The season closes on a jaw-dropping final scene. In Japan, now a war-torn nightmare dimension where demons have been bleeding in from elsewhere for some time, a grown and battle-hardened Akane Nishino, who was rescued by Cid in a past life and has since become a respected knight known as Savior, is ambushed and nearly killed by cybernetically enhanced mercenaries working for one of her many enemies. She is seconds from death when Cid materializes, defeats her attackers without ceremony, and introduces himself once again as Lord Shadow, leaving every question about what comes next hanging gloriously in the air.